Across the Spider-Verse is now out for about a week now. It's made a lot of money. The majority of you have probably seen it, maybe even seen it twice. And I'm going to be talking about it in this video, but I want to talk about a specific take I've seen about the movie, which is not enough Spider-Man went against Miguel in the movie, or too many Spider-Man agreed with Miguel in the movie, and that's stupid or doesn't make sense or goes against the character of Spider-Man or Peter Parker and so forth. I've seen variations of this take a lot, mainly on Twitter, and I've had some friends even come to me and have that take, and I've had discussions with them, and one friend I had a discussion with about it actually ended up changing their mind after I told them my reasoning for why I think it actually does make sense, and I thought I'd share it with you guys in this video. Now you're probably wondering, where's my review? I do plan to do a spoiler review talking about everything I love about the movie, but I wanted to do this in a separate video because if I had this in there it would make it way too long, and I just wanted to get this off my chest while it's fresh in my mind so I don't forget the points that I want to make. As I like to do in these videos, you'll see some art in the background, a time lapse of a 29.9 Spider-Man drawing that I have done. If you want to see more art like this, or you want to see more of my other pieces, feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at 6stones_art. The link for that will also be in the description. But getting back to the main topic at hand, I genuinely believe that the majority of the Spider-Man agreeing with Miguel makes a lot of sense within the movie, and both this movie and Into the Spider-Verse do a good job of setting up why so many Spider-Man would agree with Miguel and why so many of them did. The movie also addresses the very complaint that people make about the movie, and in the movie they do showcase Spider-Man disagreeing with Miguel's take, or coming round to disagreeing with Miguel's take. But first I want to go over why it makes sense, why Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 29.9, has a point, and to a lot of people is right and possibly is correct in what he is saying. Now obviously Miguel's whole point to Miles in this movie is that they need to maintain the canon. The whole reason for the Spider Society is for them to maintain the canon, to make sure that the canon is not broken, so it does not lead to the destruction of said timeline or universe when it is. Now the canon is key events that happen in Spider-Man's lives, or Spider-Women's, or Spider-People's, that make them who they are. These events need to happen to make sure they get to a certain point. Basically, it's fate, it's destiny, it's a set path that they need to go through, otherwise they will never become the person they are today. Obviously, Miles conflicts with this because he realizes that his father is going to become captain, and he sees a vision of the spot causing the death of his father, and that is implied to be his canon event because a lot of Spider-Men have lost captains, and the loss of those captains that they are close to has been a canon event in their timeline. Now, whether or not Miguel's theory is 100% correct is a whole different argument. That's not what I'm trying to discuss here. What I'm trying to discuss is why people would believe that he's right, and why they would side with him over Miles. So before Miles comes to this discovery, obviously Miguel shows him why he created the Spider Society, what caused him to create the Spider Society, which was him attempting to break his canon and replace a Miguel O'Hara in a different timeline so he could have a family and be happy. And that led to the destruction of that timeline. And that was what we can assume the first time he realized that messing with canon has drastic side effects, tragic ones. Now, that there in of itself is a reason why people would agree with him and side with him, and the majority would agree with him and side. He himself has directly been victim to what happens when you mess with the canon. So, to disagree with him and to say that he is wrong, one, come off as disrespectful. Two, it wouldn't make sense for Spider-Man to be like, no, you're wrong, that's not true, because he quite literally has witnessed. He has the evidence there, plain sight, to show the Spider-Man that this can happen. So realistically, why wouldn't they believe him in that situation? Like, the man's literally been through. Now, not only did Miguel go through that situation, but you see in that video of the scene, and Miguel even directly says in that scene Isn't that right, Peter? Talking to Peter B. Parker, who was there when the destruction of that universe occurs. So even he has witnessed it. It's not just Miguel. The idea that Miguel could be lying is automatically thrown out the window because you have another Spider-Man that was with him to back him up and to validate that, yes, he has a point, we need to help him. Otherwise, billions of people could die across so many universes, right? That there in of itself should show to most people why most Spider-Men will side with him. Apparently, not good enough for most people. Another reason why I think it makes a lot of sense for people to side with him, and another bit of evidence that also backs it up, is we literally see in the movie a timeline almost breakdown due to a canon event break. And that other situation is with Spider-Man India. Now, obviously, you guys have watched the movie, you know the spot goes to Spider-Man India's timeline, Gwen and Miles chasing after him, and the whole situation occurs that leads to a lot of destruction. And in that destruction, Spider-Man India is in a situation where he could lose the love of his life, his girlfriend, or he could lose the Cap, who is the father of said girlfriend. And in that very scene, he says, "I can do both." Now, that line is important because that is repeated later on with what Miles says as a counterpoint to Miguel when he wants to save his father. He says, Spider-Man always does both, but not always, as Peter Parker says in counterpoint to that. Now, he attempts to save both, but he can't, but because Miles is there, an anomaly that's not supposed to be there, he saves the captain, and that creates a disruption in the canon. And you see a massive, what looks like a black hole, possibly, this a mass starts to envelop Spider-Man India's timeline, and the Spider Society has to rush in with devices to attempt to stabilize it and do the best they can to stop the destruction of that timeline from happening. Now, multiple things here provide more evidence as to why people would agree with Miguel and why it makes sense. If they have the technology to potentially stop the destruction of timeline after canon events are disrupted, how do you think they developed the technology to do that? You think they just invented that instantly off the rip? Other timelines have suffered the same consequence from canon disruptions. Other canon disruptions have happened. Considering that all the Spider-Men were clockwork to go deal with that situation, other Spider-Men have probably seen those situations and had to deal with those situations where the canon has been disrupted. Therefore, giving them further reason not to disagree with Miguel and to understand that Miles going to disrupt a canon event is a big problem. There is literally two whole scenes that just showcase to you exactly why people would agree. But so many people do not see it because they have this preconceived idea of who Spider-Man is, and Spider-Man has to be all good all the time, all of this, right? But in their eyes, they are doing the right thing because they have the evidence to support it. Now, whether or not ethically Miguel is right or Miles is right is up to you to decide, and I'm not really here to get into that debate because that could be a whole new video in of itself. But the movie makes it very clear and does a very good job of providing a lot of evidence to back up Miguel's side. It's the whole point of the movie to make so that there's a hard conflict and it's even harder to side with Miles, which is why when people start to side with Miles and disagree with Miguel, it doesn't happen until the end of the movie when you see Gwen establish a group of Spider-Men that clearly are going to help Miles against Miguel's orders. The very complaint of Spider-Man not siding with Miles and too many sided with Miguel is addressed at the end of the movie with a whole group of Spider-Men that disagree with Miguel, which is why I find it even more odd of a complaint. The reasons I've given to you for why people would agree with Miguel have been focused on hard evidence that would give them good reason to side with him. But what about the emotional reasoning behind why they would agree with Miguel, right? Something more on just a pure emotional, mental basis. So, in the movie, a key thing that is brought up by Miguel in an attempt to convince Miles that he needs to let this happen, he needs to let this canon event play out, and that he can't let him go, is that
being Spider-Man is a sacrifice. That's the job. That's what you signed up for.
That line is something that every Spider-Man at least the vast majority of them, if not every single one of them, understands that what Miguel said right there is true. Being Spider-Man is a sacrifice. Every Spider-Man has to give up something to do what they do. To help others, they have to sacrifice something. Think about all the Spider-Man stories that you have witnessed where Spider-Man has had to sacrifice something dear to himself for the greater good. I will give you one very good example that showcases this, and that's Spider-Man PS. I assume most of you have played Spider-Man PS4, right? If you're watching Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and you really love that movie, you've probably played the Spider-Man games. I'd be shocked if you didn't. Spider-Man 2 looks amazing, by the way. I cannot wait. But in Spider-Man PS4, now this is a spoiler for Spider-Man PS4, so if you don't want a Spider-Man PS4 spoiler, run, leave, skip this part of the video, or play the game and come back. Even more. Aunt May dies, obviously, in that game. And the reason Aunt May dies is that Peter Parker is given a choice. He's given the choice of saving May with a cure or using that to develop a cure for Devil's Breath, which could wipe out millions, could kill millions of people. Or he could save the person that he cares about so dearly, that's been with him through so much, that raised him, effectively a mother to him in Aunt May. And he has to make the hard choice of choosing to save the mass over the single and what's closer to him. He chose the greater majority because he knew that as Spider-Man, he had to make a sacrifice. Like I said before, numerous Spider-Men understand situations like that. Into the Spider-Verse does a fantastic job of setting up that as a case. Very recently, I watched Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse back to back. And a lot of the themes in Into the Spider-Verse set up the core arguments and the theme in Across the Spider-Verse. The way the two play on each other is actually really well done, considering they probably made Into the Spider-Verse not knowing if they would get a sequel. But there is a scene in Into the Spider-Verse where after Miles has lost his uncle Aaron, he's obviously in his dorm room and the other Spider-Men come to him to console him, and they all say to him, we all lost someone close to us like this. For Gwen, it was her best friend. It was Peter. For Peter B. Parker, it was his Uncle Ben. For the anime Spider-Man with the mech, which I think his name is Penny Parker, she lost her father. All of them lost something in a similar way to how Miles did in that situation. And of all people, Peter Parker says something very important.
The hardest thing about this job is you can't always save everybody.
Now, what does that sound awfully similar like? It's very similar to what Miguel says.
Being Spider-Man is a sacrifice. That's the job. That's what you signed up for.
Another reiteration where Peter B. Parker says,
I can do both! Spider-Man always...
Not always.
The idea of, in some situations, you have to sacrifice something to save others, or just in some cases, you just can't do it all, is something that's been built up in both movies, and it's something that every Spider-Man, or the majority of Spider-Man, understand this fact. It's a core fact of who Spider-Man is. Them agreeing with Miguel that
you have a choice between saving one person and saving every world
is easy for every Spider-Man to understand because they've all been through a situation like further backing him up. So not only do you have physical evidence, direct witness, and emotional reasoning, those are all the reasons that you have that disprove the idea that the Spider-Man siding with Miguel is stupid. And I feel like if after watching this video you still think it's a dumb idea for all those Spider-Men to agree with Miguel, I don't know what else I can really say to you, because the movie did a very good job of making it very easy to see why they would. And even if that wasn't good enough for you, you've got your group of Spider-Men that disagree with him at the end of the movie, so why are you complaining? One thing I did want to add is that despite me thinking that the Spider-Man siding with Miguel makes a lot of sense based off the evidence he has to support his theory and so forth, I do not think his theory is 100% correct. Now, in some cases I do think it's correct. I think he's figured out a large majority of it when it comes to the idea of the canon and what breaks it and so forth. But when it comes to specifically Miles, I think his theory is a little bit shaky, and I think in the next movie we will be revealed some things that showcase how Miles can possibly defy his theory of the canon and how the Spot also plays a part in that and so forth. Anyway, that's going to be the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe. As I said before, follow my social media if you want to see more art, and I hope you all have a very balanced day.